It interests me when people are interested in my story because I'm just a chick that grew up in East Austin, and to me, my story is a story that I share with hundreds of other people just like me that don't get the same attention as I do. But I grew up in East Austin, but my story starts in Oakland, California, where my parents are from. My mother, who is a big band jazz artist, blues singer, and my father, Vietnam veteran, militant, Black Panther, graduate from Berkeley University, also majored in, he studied Chinese history, therefore my name is China. Just like my grandparents, the way that my father and mother ended their relationship is the same way that my grandmother and my grandfather ended their relationship, which was my grandmother grabbed all the kids and ran out the house. And so that happened with me. And so I always blamed, or I always said, my life is so crazy because I just was born into craziness and chaos. And so that is an important part of my story, and why I kept thinking that was an explanation of why I'm in this constant state of crazy. And so my mom, my dad convinced my mom to let him take me for the summer. And so my mom's like, okay, yes. And I'm only 2 at this point. And I only know this because these are the stories that they told me. So my mom lets my dad take me for the summer, and he never comes back with me. And so, well, it's not a bad story. Don't get sad. Don't get sad. It gets better. I promise it gets better. So my mom, she gets the Black Panthers to come and get me from my dad. So, I'm hearing these stories like, wow, this is really crazy. This is pretty crazy. At the last minute, my mom calls off the operation, and she's like, that would just destroy this baby girl, and to be grabbed by the Black Panthers and, really, really crazy stuff. And so I always thought, wow, I got a lot going on. And so I blamed everything else in my life for that Black Panther incident. But I say that because one of my themes for dance, as I learned about modern dance, was it's how we use momentum in modern dance, and how one action leads to the next action, and how things fall and rise. And so I said, it's the momentum of the fall that allows us to rise. And so it felt right. It felt really good to me. I feel when I'm dancing and I'm moving across the floor, it's that momentum. And every time I've had a moment where I fell or something terrible happened, something really great happened right after that. But then I started to think, just yesterday, I'm going to change my lecture. And I'm going to tell you why. So I work with about 120 families currently. I've served over 800 families in the Austin area. And my mission was, because I grew up in Austin, I didn't see a lot of opportunities for me or things that I even wanted to participate in, and I just wanted to even out the playing field. So Austin has a great arts community, but if you've never participated in the arts, if you've never been exposed to the arts, you're not going to do that when you get into high school. You really have to have some major intervention to pursue the arts if you don't have any access to it. And so I had no training in dance. I just knew that a dancer was beautiful, and that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be looked at as intelligent and beautiful, and I just loved music. My family has been dancing. That just was part of what we did. But I have a few kids I'm going to highlight today, 3 in particular. One, his name is Terrence, and you can see his story online. I have KLRU did a arts and context show on these kids. But Terrence, I've known since he was 9, and he lived in a boys' home. And we reconnected when he was in middle school, and I saw him, and he had no interest in dancing, because what little boy wants to dance in middle school and be teased by all the other boys? So he had no interest in doing that. And I said, Terrence, you have to dance, or I'm going to embarrass you every single day of the rest of your middle school career. And so he finally came in, and today Terrence is graduating from TCU with a degree in dance. And so it's really amazing for him to, I know his family story. He slept on the floor for, I've taken him everywhere with me, and his family really went through a lot of struggles and decided to put him into the boys' home just because it was the best thing for the family. But it's just an example of when you have access to something. And so I used to say, it's the momentum of the fall that allows us to rise. It's the momentum of the fall that allows us to rise. And I would take my students, and we would start on one end of the floor, and I would say, okay, I want you to go from this side of the room to that side of the room. And it doesn't matter how you get there, just start moving. And so people would start moving, and we would float and do all these different motions, and some kids would cry, some would go very directly across, some would take a long time. And so the point was, it didn't matter how you got there, just as long as you got to the other side. And so I was having a conversation with a really good friend of mine, and her name is Joy. Now, my company, I have about 120 families, I said, but they're split into two different groups. So I have one group that is extremely underserved. Most of those kids are scholarshiped, and the other half of my families are very well off. So it's an interesting balance. I have a lot of families that have adopted children that want to expose their children to their culture. And so I have these different conversations with both sides, and they're very interesting. So my friend, Joy, who's on the affluent side, she goes, I know those moms are always talking about us. Aren't they always talking about us? Because we're always talking about them. And I thought about it. I was like, no, we're not talking about y'all, because we have real shit going on. We don't have time to talk about you. We have real shit going on. And so she's like, wow, I just was so sure that they were talking about us. I was like, no, they really don't ever talk about you. And so I changed my mind yesterday that it's not the momentum of the fall that allows us to rise. It's really when people help you on that way up. And so I want to leave today with an expression to you that everybody needs to help somebody up. We all have to do that, because I've seen these kids, the weight that they carry with them is so heavy that if they did have that extra lift up, they would skyrocket. I have a little girl, her name is Kaiden. She's not little, she's actually 16. She's decided to drop out of school because she just does not fit in the mold. She's angry. I met her when her family was living. My studio used to be in Highland Mall, and I met her because her family was living in the motel across the street. And so just for a break from the motel life, they would walk around the mall, and they walked by and asked how much classes were. And I could tell that they weren't going to be able to pay for classes. I said, just come on in and we'll work it out later. And the mom started to volunteer. But Kaiden, and this was 5 years ago, Kaiden has recently dropped out of school, but at the same time, she is one of the only Black ballerinas in Austin that is dancing on point. She's 16, and she will be performing in our production of the Nutcracker this year that I'm going to invite you to. But it's amazing how talented this little girl is, and she just needs more than me to believe in her. She needs all kinds of help, and the family is doing everything they can. But even with that momentum of falling, she's at a perpetual state of falling, perpetually falling. And I'm trying to find a way to reach these kids. And so when I was when I was teaching at a middle school, I did this project with my students, and we're going to get into some real shit. It's hard for me to share this, but I asked my students, this was at an all-black school, a charter school here in Austin, and I said, I was going to do this project. It was called A Message in the Music, and we were going to do dances all the way back from Africa to the 1800s, the 20s, and so on, and all the way up to current time. And I grabbed all my students, and I said, okay, so you tell me, what do you think of when you hear the word black? And I'm thinking, I'm Black Panther baby, so I have a different perspective than people growing up in Texas, even though I grew up in Texas. And these babies, middle school kids, gave me words that I was not prepared for. They said, ghetto, ugly, ignorant, stupid. This is what they said about themselves. So I knew I had to do something. We live with this implicit bias that affects these babies from a young age. It tells them who they are from a young age. The way we educate these babies about their history of who they are affects them on a daily basis. We have to do better. And I tired myself introducing culture over and over, the beautiful rhythms of Africa, the beautiful colors, the beautiful textures. Tired myself with this. And then I said, you know what? It's not on us anymore. Other communities need to stomp out hatred because it is not on us anymore to build our self-esteem so high just so that we can walk down the street and tolerate hatred. It's not fair for those children. I put so much pressure on these children to rise above, keep rising, keep rising, keep rising, keep rising. It's almost impossible. It's almost impossible. And I work with the most talented kids, even the ones that decide to drop out because they just can't do it anymore. They just can't. They know how powerful and talented they are, but the interactions that they get on a daily basis are not reflecting who they feel inside. I'm an expert at understanding that on a real basic level, humans just want to be loved. I really don't even care about race, but I have to because I have to constantly armor these children over and over and over when they encounter ignorance. So it has to be a priority for us. My daughter is sitting in class. She's going through, being a middle schooler for the first time. And she has a big puff like me. And she was sitting in class and a little boy was sitting behind her. And he kept poking at her hair and laughing at her and touching her. And, we have a lot of talks, me and my daughter. And so she turns around and she says, now I'm a nice person, but you are really pushing my buttons and I'm going to get really mad. And I was like, yes, great, that's great. She did. She stood up for herself. And the substitute teacher that was there that day put my daughter back in her place. And so immediately my daughter, who I've taught her, you have to command respect for your body. It's private, it's precious. But it wasn't private in school. It wasn't sacred. It was okay to be poked on and teased. And she said, but he's touching my hair and he's laughing at me. And the teacher responded, well, you still don't have to be mean. And so I realized my daughter at 11 is being labeled as angry black woman already. So even from this early age, it's this perpetual falling. We can't be the ones to keep lifting up these babies. Somebody has to get their children that are poking at what's different what is the way to make these changes? I don't know, but something to think about. Something to think about. You know, we have to start learning and embracing differences, because you might be artsy and creative and wonderful and love, but I'm going to tell you, Austin is the most liberal, artsy, racist place I've ever seen. I encounter more racism just trying to find a space or use a theater. I've been turned away. I've been on a phone saying, okay, I've booked the space. I've done everything that I need to do. I've filled out the paperwork. I show up with 100 black kids and, so I'm sorry, but we made a mistake. It happens all the time to me. And I'm not trying to do it like, poor us and look what's happening. I'm not mad. I just want people to be aware. It's a daily thing for people of color. Daily, every single day. And we're tired. And so we think that it's not on us anymore. It's on you to get your communities to stand up. When you see hatred, because I know there's no hatred in the room, but we've all witnessed, we've all seen hatred. We've all grown up around hatred. And when you see it, you have to be the ones to make the difference. You have to. Because while things disturb us on the news and we watch things that happen, you're able to turn off the TV and walk away and be angry. But I have to go and worry about, is that going to happen to me or my son? I'm in a perpetual state of nervousness, anxiety, and frustration and anger. And how do I maintain this love? How do I do that? So I was going to go on and on about crazy experiences that I've had, but they would horrify you. I mean, even as of a couple weeks ago, being pulled over for not turning my signal and having a gun pulled out because I said, but I did turn on my signal. It's crazy. It's so extreme that you couldn't even imagine. You couldn't even imagine. And so I'm doing this project called Woke Families. And I'm asking people to join me in just making a stand and a statement that we're going to acknowledge that these things are happening because it's not fair for these children. I'm a Black Panther baby, so I can handle a lot of different things. And I've been exposed to a lot of love. I've had this fortunate opportunity for people to want to hear me speak. But my passion is in dancing, but I use it as an avenue to be an activist for these kids. And you can do something. There's so many things that you can do. If you want to know what you can do, you can call me. I'm very easy to reach. I want to brag about a project that I have going on. I am doing a production of the Nutcracker that is composed by Duke Ellington. A lot of people don't realize that he did a version of the Nutcracker, which is really amazing. I've managed to finagle a partnership with Austin Community College, and their orchestra is going to play the music for these kiddos. You will see kids like Kaiden on point dancing, Kaiden in Paris. Lastly, I want to say my dream is to build a facility for these kids to do what it is that we do in a space that's safe and beautiful and that is fit for the beautiful people that they are. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know I didn't talk. I am a real dancer. I really am a dancer, but something just moved my heart today to speak on those things. So because Joseph happened to play my theme song, so I had no choice but to talk about some real shit. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Thank you. my dad did a really great job of exposing me to culture in Austin. So I got to see the Mexican folkloric group. I got to see the Chinese dragon dancers. I got to see the Irish dancers. And I just didn't see myself. And I don't want to see the Mexican folklorico with white people or black people or anybody else but Mexicans. Like, I don't want to see the Irish group. So it's important you can appreciate it, but step back and let people have their culture. It's important. And it's not, being able to appreciate something is the first step. An appreciation, develop an appreciation.